was just unmuting myself. Okay, the officers on the slate are Eileen Bardell as chair, Joanna Fredericks, secretary, Barbara Kent, treasurer, and the board members, other board members include Tatiana Arguello, Jack Bombach, Matt Gleason, Nadi Kahana, Radha Karnishna Mohan, David Pulchik, and Debbie Pulchik.
Thank you, John. We need a motion to proceed with the election of these candidates. Can someone make a motion, please? Can someone make a motion?
I make a motion to proceed.
Please, okay. Will someone second the motion?
I second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the way we are going to proceed is I will ask for a show of hands of those who are currently members of Peace Action. You can only vote if you're a current member of Peace Action of Staten Island. So if you would please raise your hands if you are in favor and keep them raised so we can see.
Are you muted? No.
Is Sally counting? Sally, do you have the number?
I think I counted 19.
Okay.
I hope I was right.
All righty. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, then our secretary, John Lawrence, will cast one vote for all the candidates. John?
I cast a positive vote for all the candidates.
Thank you, John. Congratulations to our new board. I know we all look forward to working with each other for the coming year. And at this time, I want to thank John Lawrence and Rashenda Kramer, who are stepping down. I want to thank you for your dedication and your commitment to Peace Action and to peace. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we go on to the forum, I just wanted to tell you about some upcoming events. There was a mass rally and march that was going to occur in Washington, D.C., the Poor People's Campaign Assembly and March, but because of COVID, it had to go digital. So next Saturday, which is June 20th, the Mass Poor People's Assembly and March on Washington will be the largest digital gathering of poor and impacted people, faith leaders, and people of conscience. We have two pandemics going on in our country right now, COVID-19 and systemic racism. Our country is being torn apart by economic and racial inequality. The Poor People's Campaign is a national call for moral revival. It is made up of people, of all backgrounds, Black, brown, Native, Asian, white, young, old, Christian, Sikh, Jewish, Buddhist, Muslim, Hindu, people of faith and not of faith, people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. Led by poor people, we are a cross-class movement. Rejected millions, the poor without health care insurance, living wage, clean water, voting protections, safe and affordable housing, and much more. To find out how you can get involved, go to june2020.org, sign up, and be there. This campaign is a call to our nation to recognize the injustices facing 140 million poor and low-income people. Compare that to the 1% in our country who control 40% of the wealth. Get involved. It will be broadcast next Saturday at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. June2020.org. The next event, which is still in the planning stage, and we will be sending out information as plans are finalized, but we will commemorate the 75th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These bombings represent the only time in history that one country has used nuclear weapons against another country. Hiroshima was bombed on August 6, 1940, and Nagasaki was bombed 3 days later on August 9, 1945. Tens of thousands of people died. By the end of the year, 210,000 people had died. And today, people in these cities still continue to die from problems related to the bombings. Our event will be held between August 6th and August 9th. We will let you know. As I said, it's still in the planning stages. So please join us as we work towards building peace in our world. At this time, before we get into the forum, I want to ask for a moment of silence in memory of George Floyd. This man's life was taken on May 23rd by a man who had taken an oath to uphold the law and protect the lives of others. Tragically, that did not happen. So please take a moment of silence to remember George Floyd. Thank you. And now, our forum. And it is my pleasure to introduce Dave Pulchik, who will be our moderator today. Dave is a member of the Board of Peace Action of Staten Island, longtime activist, and a retired New York City teacher. So Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I wanted to say that I think it's an excellent group of people we have today, because these are voices that are not put out first and foremost in these times. And I think the voices of what's happening in the crisis is very important. I'd first like to introduce Ibrahim San Gary. He's a former Amazon worker who worked here on Staten Island and was active there. And he's from the African Community Organization of Staten Island. I hope I got the name correct, Ibrahim. And he's going to speak first. Thank you, Ibrahim.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Ibrahim San Gary. I'm from Ivory Coast. So I'm an Amazon former worker. So I started working for Amazon. There was October 2018. I thought it was a good opportunity because they start hiring by paying, the rate was $17.50. So I thought it was good. So I jumped on the opportunity to say, hey, I'm gonna help my family, help everybody there. So I get the job. I didn't know what was expecting me being inside Amazon, warehouse in Staten Island. As a warehouse worker, I worked the night shift, working from 5:15 p.m. to 8 in the morning. So we were told that there will be only one day mandatory overtime. So every day we were forced to work on our feet at least 10 hours. And sometimes, even we had to work 10 hours, before the end of the shift, the manager was coming to, hey, you guys, can you work more, an extra 1 hour, 2 hours, before and then, either you can keep going, or what they used to do, that was at the beginning of the shift. They said, today we're gonna finish at 5:45 instead of 4. So you didn't have any choice. You didn't have any choice. You had to do, because everything's in the computer. Because if you don't do it, they take hours, from your OPT, So it was very hard working over there, because it's like a scanning item, and they ask you to scan at least 2,000 items for a 10-hour shift. So you had to be walking on the stairs, lifting boxes, going up and down. You barely have a break time. Even when you have a break, 15-minute break time, from your workstation to go to the bathroom or the break room, it takes you like a 10 minutes. So you barely have a break time. So it was very challenging walking over there because you walk like an animal, because they don't care about you getting some, some pain on your body. Anytime you get something burned on your body, you go to the arm care. They have a small office, like just to take care of you. They just give you some, ice, and they don't tell you to go home or to check a doctor. They just bring you back to work. The only thing they care about, the job. They have a goal to reach every night. So if they don't reach this goal, they don't let you go home. They don't let you rest. They don't care about you. They care about the job. They care about the numbers. So I realized that Amazon was the worst place to work because they don't care about the human being. They don't care about how you feel, how your body is, but they do care about the numbers. They do care about their job. And at the beginning of our contract, they say, hey, you guys not supposed to speak up. This is the job, this is the contract. That means we didn't know that there's gonna be a lot of abuses, So later on, when we discovered it was a lot of problems going on, we start talking to each other, what's happened here, what's happened, how we can, unite together to fight for our right. So we were like a fire at the same time. So they abuse a lot, and the working conditions very tough. It's very inhuman, and the break time is very short, and you can't even talk to anybody because when you start working, they don't want you to talk to anybody. They just behind you, like go. We need to reach this goal. That's the way they shot. They yelling on workers. So it's like instead of coming beating people, they come. You gotta go. We gotta reach this. So I realized this Amazon worker wasn't good for me. So I have to leave because I don't want to kill myself working for somebody making billion of dollars, and I don't make that money. So I decided I wasn't doing my job until they fired me, and I was happy because for me, firing me, it was the end of kind of, slavery, because we used to call Amazon, modern plantation. That's the way we used to call it because it was very tough. With a lot of people have a lot of mental issue when they start working Amazon, and most of 80% of workers in Amazon don't stay more than 3 months over there. Don't rest, As a former Amazon worker, I started, being involved in the communities, talking to my, former workers to unite, to fight, to improve working conditions. And that's why I used to work with the Nia community for change. But now I'm working with the African communities and I'm fighting for, African communities. And this week, we had a event with Max Rose, Charles Foss, Chief Corey. Our goal is just to bring the police and the Black community to, to work together so that we don't have this kind of George Floyd incident, So as a speaker, I use, the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, where, we say we all this truth to be self-evident that all men are created equal, and I use the 14th Amendment, Section 1, that say all persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction as citizens of the United States. So this Constitution guarantees everybody the right to be good citizen, the privilege, the immunity of citizenship, the due process, and equal protection. So no distinction between Black, white, yellow. I'm gonna cut off here because I don't wanna go over my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was very, very moving and
Enlightening.
enlightening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll have time for questions at the end again. Our next person is Steve Lawton, who's president of the Communication Workers of America's Local 1102 on Staten Island, who has been very active in our community, both fighting for his own workers and working with other people about other issues. So I'm very happy to introduce him. Steve?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me today. I'm happy to be here to talk about some of the struggles that workers were facing during the pandemic, the dual pandemic of COVID, and then, of course, of the uprisings that we're dealing with now. Just so everyone understands, my local has 500 members. Our local has 500 members. 250, about 50% of them work at Verizon Communications, and 50% of them work at a company called Conduent, who administer the Easy Pass system for all of New York State. So it's a call center. And it's interesting because I dealt with two different worlds during the pandemic when it came about. First, I just want to say that I think what COVID did for most workers, the way I've described it in some of the things I've written recently, was that it was how do you say, my brain just, it was trauma, you know, it was a traumatic experience. You know, you didn't see it coming. All of a sudden you're being told that, you know, everything was shutting down and that non-essential workers, as the government was calling them, was sent home. Others were essential workers, which happened to be two groups of my membership. Both were deemed essential. So they were dealing with the fear of the pandemic without the choice of having to work. They had to go to work. So that fear, the best way I could describe those first couple of days was literally a trauma, you know, where people were just not sure what was going to happen to them, very nervous about their lives, very nervous about safety. There wasn't enough PPE. There wasn't really much guidance from the government or from the corporations. However, I do want to state that early on there was two different paths that each one of these groups went. Verizon Communications, believe it or not, who had just been taken over. We just got a new CEO who came from Sweden. His first name is Hans. He had a very proactive and progressive plan, and actually Verizon was very good in treating the workers with respect and dignity. In fact, in the first week, they offered all workers 8 weeks of full paid leave, and also hazard pay for those that stayed. So basically, every worker in Verizon had a choice. You could stay and get paid more, or you can go home, even for childcare, with paid leave at full pay, which was amazing because it really showed that what was possible, and it really gave those workers a choice, which I thought was the most dignified way to deal with the situation. Some chose to stay, some chose to go home, but ultimately everybody was made safe. On the other side, in the call center, we had an opposite effect. We had a situation where I guess the corporation was more worried about their own liabilities early on, and they were not willing to even speak about it or talk about any protocols or talk about any paid leave for the workers who needed it for childcare, for high risk situations. So these were all things that we, the union, brought up to them and said we should start talking about early on, but they chose not to speak on those issues. So we entered into a good 4 or 5 week battle to try to win the right to work from home, which we ultimately did win with the help of the state senator Savino, who stepped in because she had some influence with the transportation authorities to help us achieve that. But it was in that 4 or 5 weeks, literally, the workers felt like they were going to be sick at any moment in that environment. It was a call center environment. There was very bad air circulation. There was very bad PPE. The company was doing the minimum amount of cleaning. It was just pure terror for those workers for those couple of weeks. We did achieve work from home, which was a big victory for our union and a big victory for those workers. And, that got us through pretty much up to this point where both members, the membership of 1102 has been made safe, which I really appreciate that. But then we just got pulled into this new struggle that we have in front of us. And our union really wants to be a leader in pushing the labor movement to be more open and more participation in the Black Lives Matter movement. It's something that we have been working with over the last couple of years in terms of trying to educate our members about the intersections between labor rights and civil rights and all these other different things. We've done marches on environmental causes. We've done marches on all sorts of different social immigration rights, healthcare. So we've kind of spread this. This was the first time that we've actually pushed for the Black Lives Matter, and I'm very proud of the CWA nationally, locally, for really pushing that issue. And so I say right now, while the protests are happening on the streets, the way I like to frame it is that the protests are happening in every American institution at this current moment, including our unions. And we are seeing the protest movements, the counter-protest and the protest movements within our own ranks, where we have members that are fighting for Black lives, and then we have members that don't think we should. But we're dedicated to holding that line and making sure that we push the conversation about Black lives and the importance of that we recognize Black lives, and we don't try to dilute it in any way. Also, we believe that as white leaders, white male leaders of my union, that we have to lead the conversation around racism, because racism is a construct of white supremacy, and it's going to take white people to dismantle that. It's not up to our Black brothers and sisters to deal with the psychosis of the white people who have created this injustice. So I know that not everyone understands that concept yet, and we're working through that with our rank and file, and we're working through those conversations, because let's face it, some white people who have grew up in majority white scenarios haven't really realized what their privilege was. They don't really realize it, and they don't know their history, and they don't know their economic statistics either. So I'm just happy that we're taking that battle on right now. So we've really been up against it for the last 3 months. It's probably the hardest I've worked as a labor leader in my 20 years of doing this. So I'll leave it there. I'll wait for the questions. Thank you.
Thank you again, Steve. Our next speaker is Sneferu Boatwright, who's a transit worker and has been active in both labor struggle and inactive against struggles against police brutality for many years, even though he's a young man. So, Sneferu.
Hello, how you guys doing? Yeah, I guess what I really want to start is, I've been in transit for, almost going on 3 years now. I'm a check worker. I work in a union caucus called Progressive Action, and it's a lot going on right now, as a lot of you already know. First, I wanted to talk about what was happening with the development of the how NTA executives and team was tackling or handling the COVID-19 with the workers there. First off, I guess the most devastating thing is that we are now over 130 workers dead now. 130, and the death toll is increasingly and continually rising. And a lot of this has been due to the fact that MTA has been just very passive and ineffectively taking charge to making sure that workers' lives come first. And in doing so, they have been very dropping the ball as far as making sure that workers have what they need, as far as PPE, as far as sanitizing equipment, gloves. We have been told that we are in this together, but we are the only ones that are sacrificing the most here. So the other things that are going on is that we've been so the union leadership is not doing much. The union leadership is only fight that they want to take on is making sure that we get compensated for our lives, compensated when we die from COVID-19, and also for hazard pay, which at this point doesn't seem like we're going to be getting, because even though it was passed by the House, it was denied by the Senate. And it's also, I think that throughout this entire time of since the rise of COVID-19 since February, MTA has repeatedly called for the same amount of work to be done, with some small hiccups. Like for some workers, they can get a week off a month, and while others have continuously must continue to work, like transit workers who drive the trains, operate the buses and trains and whatnot. But majority of the workers who are dying are like coming up on their pensions, right? And so these workers are the ones who.
We just lost you for a minute, Sneferu.
Scam call. Yeah, so these are the workers that are the ones that are being most affected, and are the ones that are headed towards pension, receiving their pension and retirement. And this is one way that the MTA bosses are really going to be gaining back their money, and in my case, from these workers dying. And even though, I mean, and these jobs that are being lost through the deaths of these transit workers may not even be regained back. There's a lot of cutbacks that we are noticing. The MTA has also called on the cleaning of the stations. This must have started like sometime in April, where they actually started to initiate cleaning between 1 and 5 in the morning. This was mostly after many transit workers have shown pictures and video footage of how filthy and dirty these trains are, and only because of these transit workers who blew the whistle on how horrible these situations are, and how dangerous it is, and how it's a breeding ground for this disease, that they finally took initiative to finally say, okay, you know what, this is how we're going to handle it. We're going to remove all the homeless people off the subways from 1 to 5. And then we're going to do some cleaning to some stations and some buses. But they cannot do all. And the ones that they are cleaning are ones that are being cleaned by contractors who are not getting a fair wage. And these have been also a part of a lot of the majority of the jobs that transit workers have lost due to the last contract negotiation. So many of these cleaning jobs have gone to subcontractors, and they're no longer MTA union jobs. Now, this is a very short time. We're talking a few months, you know, of these little attacks on transit workers, and how the best way that they could have really effectively stopped the rise of the virus and kept workers from dying was they initiated some kind of way of either closing some of these stations, closing the stations, or only initiated some buses to take essential workers to their jobs, or like and urgent care, hospitals, emergency rooms, what have you. Now, given that, I want to get into what's going on as far as police brutality and how the union responded or has been responding to this. I want to go back as far as 2 years ago when New York City was starting a fare hike, and workers, working class people were starting to be very started to protest and started to to face MTA property and jumping the turnstiles and whatnot. And there was even a few cases where in the media where we've seen some passengers would either were seen attacking transit workers in this response. But it was also a combination of two things. It was the media saying that the reason the fare hikes had to happen in the first place is because of the workers' salary. This is what the president of MTA was saying, and thus putting the workers on to blame for that. Some working class people would attack certain transit workers. So the union called for 500 police officers to remain on the stations and platforms to keep guide of more of not just fare beaters, but also to quote unquote protect transit workers. Through that, we've seen increase of police brutality all the way up to the end of last year in November, where we're still having many protests in New York City. I know some of you might remember this, where there were protests by the thousands at stations, mass people evading, protesting and just angry about how the police were not only attacking young Black Latin students who were on the way to school or on the way back home from school, and trying to put them in bars and in cuffs and take them downtown, and this is something, and this is something that our union was supporting, and has continued to support more cops to protect transit workers. But see, the thing is that too, that these police were not just attacking passengers riding the subway, beating some of them to an inch of their life, but they were also attacking transit workers. There's also many cases where it's been reported that women workers have been attacked by police officers who were either on duty and off duty. And some of which have been really scared for their lives, and there hasn't been any real repercussions to mediate that. Fast forward, we are just last month, we're talking about in May, that my union president, Tony Utano, was seen at a press briefing with the Pat Lynch, the union president of the police department. Yeah. All right. And so what happened is that our union president was basically trying to get support from the police union department of police union to support us to receive MT employees to receive hazard pay. This happened last month, and the response was very fierce. Many workers were very upset about this. Why is the union keep aligning itself with the police department? And it wasn't until the death of George Floyd and all this these protests that's been happening, has the union actually started to really distance themselves from New York City police, and they actually finally started to align themselves with another transit union, ATU, from Staten Island, and they put out an issue to keep workers from transit workers from allowing the cops to use their buses to transport protesters to jail. Now, this was good. Many workers were very happy to do this. However, there are still there's still going to be a fight, because now not MTA, not yet that I've seen yet, but there have been other cases where in Staten Island Union, where they're going to try to use that to fire or discipline some of those workers from from refusing service to police force. So this is an ongoing thing, but we in Progressive Action, we believe that the union can do more. There's a lot more that can be done, and the union wants to talk about the years of how many times that we've experienced or walked in these protests with Dr. King. They always want to highlight the glory days of the union, which is never now, and it's never. It's a very difficult thing when you see a union who was coming from one of the most fierce fighting unions in this country are showing such disunity by not being there and the heat with the rest of the protesters to support. They only support George Floyd and his family on paper, and they never take on the regards of other transit workers, which in this city are majority Black and Latino. The union has been failing us workers here for many years, and this is no difference. So we need to fight. We need to fight hard. We're trying to encourage many workers to be a part of these protests, the fight in the streets. We're trying to build more unity with all of our multi-racial unity is what we need in transit, and that fighting racism is everyone's job, and it's pretty much like brother over here from Verizon was saying before, you know, and I really like the work that he's doing, you know. What you call it, the worker from Amazon. I mean, these are some same basic attacks that we get, which is making sure that we keep working and that we stay divided and that we are not and really engaged in the struggle with the masses. And I think that we have to fight. We have to push the union to do it. I think you know, fighting racism and it has to be at the center of that fight. I yield my time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, very enlightening.
A lot of information that I didn't know and reminded me of things that I didn't know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now like to introduce Selina Gray Brown. She's a representative of the New York State Nurses Association, people who were on the front lines also.
Like my daughter.
And okay, Selina, thank you.
Thank you for having me speak today. My name is Selina Gray, and I am a political community organizer with the New York State Nurses Association, which compromises of about 43, probably close to 44,000 nurses in New York State. We currently have 3 facilities here in Staten Island that we organize: Rumsey, Staten Island University Hospital, and the Visiting Nurses Association right here on the North Shore. What COVID-19 unmasked for our members is the fact that we needed safe staffing more than ever before. This is a fight that the members have been having for quite some time. COVID came and the pandemic hit, and we had to shift our focus to PPE, making sure that we keep our members safe. And that was a really big challenge here in Staten Island. As you know, the hospitals out here in Staten Island are not part of the public system. Northwell is in partnership with SIUH. They have a lot of money. When PPE started flowing down from the government, they were kind of, you know, really taken care of. They were able to receive their PPE in a timely fashion, you know, down the road. But then we have Rumsey here on the North Shore that is not part of any system, and that is a standalone hospital. And they struggled, and they still struggle today. And then we have the Visiting Nurses Association, which wasn't on anyone's radar. I had to partner with community-based organizations and even people outside of the state to get PPE to our members, which is really crazy. I know that the elected officials were fighting as a team to ensure that PPE flowed to our hospitals here in Staten Island. The hospital that was struggling the most and that continues to struggle is the Rumsey Hospital. And I know that our council member tried to get Rumsey designated temporarily as part of the H&H system and fought tooth and nail to make sure that they got what H&H received because they just were not on the radar. And thankfully they did. Other elected officials did as well. What it did amass, like I said earlier, is our safe staffing. We had visiting nurses come from different states, and they were surprised and shocked that there were 8 to 9 patients to 1 nurse. And that's a challenge because it puts our community at risk. Nurses can't take care of patients and monitor their needs. It really puts our community at risk. One of the things that we did fight prior to COVID was to make Rumsey an indigent care hospital, which they're not. They take care of a vulnerable population, which doesn't have health insurance. They're underinsured. We're the sickest. And one of the things another thing that we're trying to push through the system is the New York Health Act that has been stuck in the Senate for God knows how long. I saw one of the questions in the chat about what getting a newly elected Democratic people, if we had a Democratic, the majority of our electeds are Democrat come November, would that make a difference? And I have to venture to say no, because we have the state Senate is all Democrat, and this legislation has been caught up in there forever and ever, amen. And when we had our screenings for our electeds who wanted our endorsement, one of the questions that we asked is like, what will you do to get this legislation passed in the Senate? And at this point, we're not looking for people to co-sponsor these bills anymore. We're actually looking for champions. And we need people to champion their bills. We need assembly members to talk to their senator colleagues and make sure that this passes, because it's imperative. I just felt like COVID just unveiled all of the things that are broken in our hospitals. Moving forward, our members now are reopening. Elective surgeries are happening as of the 15th. What is that gonna look like? I have no idea what that's gonna look like, but we have 35 members that have passed away, and I would say 75% of those members were members of color. That's telling, and it's heartbreaking. One of the things that I know on the Black Lives Matter movement is that's something that was never spoken about in the union. We spoke about social justice issues, which contain climate, LGBTQ rights, but Black and Brown issues were not at the forefront of our union's topic. Pat Kane is now our executive director, and she is passionate to ensure that we're part of this and that we're sensitive to our members, because if you know our H&H nurses, those are our public sector nurses. Most of them are nurses of color. There's a lot of pushback. There is a lot of pushback. People are not happy. They want all lives to matter. But I feel as a nurse, if you're a nurse and you feel indifferent to Black lives, how are you treating our patients? And that's telling to me. It is going to create uncomfortable conversations, but I think that at this point we need to be uncomfortable in order to get it right. I don't know what that's going to look like down the road. I'm telling you, I don't. I was assigned to be part of the Social Justice Committee, and those ladies, men and women, are passionate about ensuring that we're at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement. But I don't know what it's going to look like in our other facilities, and those are going to be tough conversations to have. Really tough. And I'm just imagining in my head how that's going to look. When we talk about our other brothers and sisters that are opening up and have to go back to work, my husband, he's an office professionals union, and there are 5 benchmarks that have to be hit in order for people to go back to work. It's really scary for a lot of people at this time. I know our nurses never had that opportunity. They just had to stay in the hospital and do what they had to do because they were essential. But a lot of my brothers and sisters that are on this call and out there fighting the fight, a lot of them have to go back to work. And there's 5 metrics that need to be hit: social distancing, protective equipment, cleaning and hygiene, communication, and screening. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the schools are going to look like. And I'm just really, really scared. But as I said, elective surgeries are starting to happen. As of June 15th, our hospitals are opening back up for those things. And personnel is shifting from COVID units back to, their regular designations. And it's going to be difficult. And I'm just here to support our members and to support the community. And I look forward to any questions that anyone has. And I thank you for being here, and I yield my time.
Thank you so much, Selina. Very good. And I remember back in 2014, when we started to go out of better, garner members of your union, and Pat were out there, one of the first people to come out with us. Next one to speak is Larry Goldbetter, who's the president of the National Writers Union. The writers unions fighting and journalists fighting have been in the news a lot, so it'd be great to hear from him. Thank you, Larry.
All right, thanks. As Selina and others have pointed out, you know, the COVID crisis really exposed the whole deal of inequality, of racism, and followed by the police brutality, the 3 killings in Georgia and Louisville and then Minneapolis really set off a firestorm. And our union, which represents freelance writers, has both been affected by this and also been active participants in it, I'm proud to say. We have 1,400 members around the country. They're journalists, they're book authors, they're technical writers, but they're all 1099s. They're not staff writers. And in the overall, in the news industry, thousands, about 50% of the news industry was cut in half. The news industry was cut in half. Newsrooms were cut in half over the last decade. And the industry was already very weak. And then when the crisis came, it was devastating. Since March, 36,000 journalists have either lost their jobs or had taken wage cuts or furloughs. And freelance budgets go before staff budgets do. So we were really bracing for a big drop in membership and some serious repercussions. And so far the membership has held, which is encouraging. And the anti-racist rebellion that's recently taken place, really has had a big effect on our industry in a number of ways. One, which was kind of visible to a lot of people, was the attacks on journalists who were trying to cover the demonstrations. In many cities, journalists were arrested, were shot at on camera. Everybody saw the picture of the CNN reporter being handcuffed, and then the cameraman, and then the producer all being walked off. When they cleared Lafayette Park, I don't know if, there's a video of the police walking up to this cameraman who's an Australian news guy and pulling down the camera, busting him in the face. And as they're leaving, the woman anchor, the reporter, gets a club across the back while they're leaving. So there were all of these very focused attacks on reporters. But more than that, there was also big anti-racist pushback in a lot of newsrooms. So in the New York Times ran the piece about from Tom Cotton, send in the troops. This openly white supremacist senator from wherever he's from, who was calling for the army to put down the demonstrators. 800 workers at the New York Times rebelled against that, and the editor was fired as a result. The opinion editor was fired for running that piece. And the Pittsburgh Gazette, 2 black reporters, one of them a Pulitzer Prize winner, were banned from covering the protest by their editor because they were going to be biased in how they covered the anti-racist demonstrations. And the union took on a big campaign in their defense, and that editor also was fired. And at the Philadelphia Inquirer, there was a similar story where they ran a headline, Buildings Matter, a real attack on the concept of Black Lives Matter. Buildings matter. And the newsroom exploded, and that was another editor that had to resign. So we think it's a good thing that, that's really the question for us, is how do we bring this anti-racism that's been so exposed by the dual pandemics of racist terror and COVID, how do we bring that to the workplace? How do we bring that into our union? And to carry on that rebellion, because eventually the demonstrations are gonna stop or die down, but the fight has to continue, and it has to continue in our jobs and in our workplaces and in our unions. As Selina pointed out, this question about the Democrats, not making much of a difference. I don't have to tell this crowd here. We all live here, in New York City and New York State, with all Democrats running the show, has 22,000 COVID deaths, 22,000 in New York City, and the highest rate in the country by far. And the main aspect of that is poverty and racism. That's where those deaths come from largely. And, and I'm telling people in my union, and I'm telling people in my family, I'm telling everybody I know, if you think that Schumer and Pelosi and Joe Biden are gonna solve the problem of racist police brutality and inequality, you're just kidding yourself. Whether you vote or not, no matter how you vote, whatever, you need to be part of an active movement that's focused on fighting racism. Our members in the Writers Union are, as I mentioned, are all 1099s. They're not W-2s. So we are not eligible for unemployment insurance, and we are not covered by collective bargaining agreements. So in the face of the COVID shutdown, that was a huge challenge for us. And it's in part why pandemic unemployment assistance was passed, PUA, so that if you didn't qualify for unemployment insurance, you could qualify for this pandemic unemployment. And it's a reflection of how the economy has shifted over the years, so that so many workers are now classified as 1099s and misclassified as 1099s as a way of stealing their benefits from them. Everything from sick time to workers' comp to unemployment insurance. There are now so many of them that they felt, the government felt that they had to have something for this number of workers, because it's like a third of the workforce. And if a third of the workforce was getting no aid at all, it could have been a big problem for them. So our membership falls within that third of the workforce. And it's an ongoing struggle. I mean, I would say that as of now, well over 50% of our members and other independent contractors have not yet received the pandemic unemployment assistance and are really struggling. And the last thing, just quickly, right now we're in a big campaign to organize freelance agreements at publications that have staff contracts. So where the staff is union and has a collective bargaining agreement, we're attempting to set standards for freelancers in those publications. And that's an organizing campaign that's brought us about 300 new members since October. And it's similar in some ways to the Fight for 15 campaign among fast food workers. Because there's no floor, there's no minimum in publishing for freelancers. Some people are working for pennies a day, pennies a word. And so what we're trying to do is establish a minimum, a floor. And freelancers can negotiate over that floor, but we want to make sure that there's at least a minimum. So I know we're running a little over. I'll stop there so we can entertain some questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Larry. Very good, very interesting about what's going on, especially with people who, this wonderful gig economy that they've been promoting among young people, or imposing on young people. We have one more speaker, Tatiana Arguello. She's the Director of Workforce Development at United Activities Unlimited, and has been trying to lead the fight or leading the fight about all the cutbacks that are coming already, including the summer youth employment program, which he brought to our attention right away when that happened. Tatiana?
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I want to share my screen if that's okay.
Tatiana, I'm going to give you the ability to share your screen. Just give 1 second.
Okay, thank you.
Tatiana. Okay, you should be able to share your screen.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I'll just, I'll go fast. I know that not everyone had a slideshow, so I apologize for the formality. But just a little bit about UAU. We were incorporated in 1977 after a concern of DOE from educators about DOE cuts to after-school programming. So the reason why I bring this up is because we're seeing similar cuts this year in response to COVID, and we're seeing how youth are left without pro-social engagement this summer. And so I wanted to go a little bit into what kind of transitions we've made to our programming because of COVID, and then what summer programming would, should, or could look like. So UAU runs after school programs. We also run community centers. I am the director for our workforce development programs. We also have prevention and family and social service programs. We also have a wonderful fatherhood program that we run, and a summer camp programming that we run. So the Beacons and Cornerstone, our community programming, have transitioned to different video conferencing platforms to engage youth and families during the crisis. We've also seen our cornerstones really step up and be host sites for food distribution, book distribution, sentence distribution, and they were safely distributing and are still distributing meals and snacks to our communities. We have our Compass and Sonic programs. Those are our after-school programs for elementary and middle school. And, you know, along with the Beacon and Sonics, they have been really just doing a lot of wellness calls and really making sure that they're providing opportunities for virtual engagement, and have been doing things from tutoring to just other resources and things that could be provided for our young people. Our Fatherhood Matters program also went digital, and they have workshops every Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays. And they are also making the necessary adjustments and accommodations to keep these services here. They've also hosted family engagement and other fun activities throughout the crisis. So the Workforce Division has continued the work as well. We've done virtual college tours. We've also made sure that youth have gotten equipment, and we gave out equipment to our train and earn and learn and earn teams to make sure that our youth were still going to be able to engage with their schoolwork or with the program. And for the SYP program, we were also working to make SYP virtual. We are still in the process of developing our curriculum and making sure that we are using platforms that could be utilized, whether that's a phone or tablet, or we're being very sensitive with just what meeting youth where they're at. And unfortunately, we were told of the cancellation of SYEP on April 7th. Providers were given a day's notice to pretty much terminate their whole staff and to shut down operations. Although we were told that, you know, we were actually given the green light from the mayor's office that all programming would really continue to happen throughout the fiscal year, so June 30th, and that was before we were abruptly canceled. Prevention services have still been going on. You know, they're working with the DOE crisis team, making sure that they're doing trauma-informed approaches, and also teaming up with TISA to create SEL learning at home. And the family prevention, this is ACS prevention. They've also been conducting home visits and conferences and getting food out to our families that are in that program, and making sure that services are continual. So there's a whole lot of different programming that I just went over in terms of UAU's deliverance. Although we found ways to make sure that programming was still happening after the COVID became a situation, we're seeing how we're being reclassified as non-essential. The mayor, in an attempt to save funds, you know, because we are in a deficit, is cutting a lot of essential programming for our families and young people. So DYCD had made us aware that they were cutting the Beacon, Cornerstone, Compass, Sonic programming effective July 1st. This means that there will be little to none free camps this summer for our young people. This means that as people who will be returning to work, who've had the privilege to work from home, or you know, who have been trying to make situations work for the last few months, will continue to have to figure out how to make situations work because there is no programming that will happen for our young people in terms of summer camp. We've also heard that SYEP was also canceled, and that means that there's over 75,000 young people this summer who will not be able to earn a wage and participate in, you know, what is their first work experience or skill building that, you know, we traditionally do every year. On Staten Island alone, that is over 6,000 young people who will not be able to earn a wage and gain experience. And that really that breaks my heart, because, you know, when you're talking about families, they can really use the money that comes from these programs. You know, we've heard from so many of our families and our young people, and, you know, including people I know, it's just, you know, everyone could use additional income at this moment, and whatnot. So when we're talking about our response, we have been proactive in trying to urge the mayor and trying to urge the city council to hold the mayor accountable. The city council has done a wonderful job at supporting us and has really let the mayor know that these cuts are so devastating to our communities, and they've been fighting back against all of these different cuts that we are set to see this summer. Councilwoman Debbie Rose has been championing all of these cuts and making sure that, you know, her colleagues and also the city administrators know that these cuts would be detrimental, and that there has to be some sort of programming happening this summer. So we've held a virtual town hall. We've heard from over 35 young families all over different communities, and different CBOs were also a part of that. We had over 3,000 people listening in and engaging in that event. We've also had tons of people sending us testimonials and emails and questions. So we've been sending those along to the mayor and to the comptroller as we get them. We have been advocating tirelessly to make sure that they understand and hear from our families. we have heard some news, twofold. One is the city council was, for lack of words, interrogating the CYCD commissioner and asking him, what programming will happen this summer, to which he responded, if there's funding, we will have programming. If there's not, we will not. And that he saw SYEP coming back in some form. There was like whispers of certain things, but nothing was really certain. We also saw, on Sunday, the mayor promised to move NYPD funding to youth services, and there has been a call to defund the police. I think a call that's up to $1 billion in funding. Currently, the NYPD budget, it accounts for way more than youth services, homeless services, parks and recs, and a few other different departments. And I really truly feel like we cannot balance a budget on the backs of our young people. And I think that it's very important to keep up this fight to make sure that our young people are not left behind because we're trying to save a few bucks. And so, I think that they're exploring different ways to see how youth services can be reinstated. We're just hoping that we hear news sooner rather than later. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a whole village to make sure that these programmings happen. There's a whole bunch of families not knowing what's going to happen this summer in terms of having something to fall back on or having another option. We actually surveyed, we put a survey out to our participants and asked if they had an alternative option, and over 80% said that they did not have an alternative option for childcare this summer. So we're speaking about the need really being there. And in terms of SYEP, we're talking about, as simple as an economic stimulus that can really, truly benefit, and it really does benefit over the years, our community and our families. And so I hope that you would join us in our advocacy. We want to let the elected officials, in particular the New York City mayor, know that these cuts should not go forward. And as they're going to do some sort of handshake on the budget, that youth services shouldn't be what they're cutting. And so we to show support, here are some sample tweets that you can partake in. We just encourage you to continue to speak to electeds and let them know about these cuts, and let them know that people are watching and that people are concerned about these budgets. Our second call is also to sign a petition by CCC. You can scan it here if you have a phone, or I can circulate this PowerPoint around to anyone who's interested. There's also a bit.ly /save summer 2020. And that is just the mayor. It's a letter that's, you can customize, but it's pretty much stating that these cuts are going to be devastating and that we need to reverse this decision. I really truly feel like if enough people make noise, we can create some sort of change, and we can restore these programmings for our young people this summer, and also for our nonprofits. There's over 90 providers of SYP alone, not to mention the Compass, Sonic Beacon, Cornerstone divisions, and just like other sectors of the economy, like small businesses, we're really seeing nonprofits really struggle through this pandemic. And we very much rely on city and state funds to keep our doors open. And my fear is that without a restoration of programming, a lot of CBOs will go under and not be able to continue to serve the communities in which they've done for years on end. Thank you for listening. And that's all I got, Dave.
Thank you very much. So at this point, we're going to go to some questions. Sally, were you going to?
Yes, we have a lot of questions, Dave.
Okay.
And
I saw some interesting statements too about downstate.
Yeah, I thought there were a lot of questions about legislation. Barbara Kent raised it and some other people answered her, but maybe we should ask Barbara to unmute herself and ask her question about the legislation, whether she got her answers or not.
Okay, all I got was confused, but that's probably my own problem. If it could just be said, it seemed like there's a New York Health Act and a New York Safeties Act. And which one, are they both stalled? Which is the one that Cuomo is signing, the New York Safety Act? All of it is just confusing to me. So maybe one of you could say what the different act status are.
The bill that I was speaking of, Ms. Kent, is the New York Health Act. This bill will create a single payer system of universal health care coverage in New York State. It will provide health care to all New Yorkers without premium contributions and high out-of-pocket costs. This has passed Assembly multiple times. I put the bill number in the chat, but the bill number in the Senate is S3577. And with a Democratic Senate, we thought that this could be something that would pass like easily. And one of the challenges that we saw was that we didn't have champions for the bill. Dick Gottfried authored the bill, but and even though people have co-sponsored the bill, the co-sponsors of the bill have not pushed it through the Senate. When we asked what was the biggest issue, the issue they claimed was they didn't know how much it cost. And my answer to that was, well, we elected our legislators to find the money, to pay for the bill, not for the people to figure it out. And that is our stance on it, and that's our position. The healthcare providers want this, our community needs it, and I hope that answers your question.
You answered almost all of it, thank you. Let me just, one tiny point, Diane Savino, has she ever voted and done anything to push it forward?
Diane Savino was a co-sponsor of the bill prior to this year. Currently, she is not a co-sponsor of this bill.
Okay, thank you so much.
Would any of the other panelists like to talk about that?
David, the very first two questions are 1 and 2 on the chat from Neil F. and Jay Stev.
Okay, Neil, you want to unmute yourself?
Sure, thank you.
I
first have two viruses, COVID-19 and racist police violence, have focused our attention on the effects of gross economic inequality and systemic racism. Things are not quote unquote normal now. What are your views, this is for the panelists, regarding quote getting back to normal versus creating something new and different?
Any of the panelists? I think you can unmute yourselves, I think.
I can tackle that question. I don't know what the new norm is going to look like. I don't think we can go back to the way things were, but we definitely have to change the status quo. If we're talking about from a safety perspective and our communities getting back to our normal lives, I don't know what that's going to look like. The workplace is going to look different. Our home life is going to look different. How we interact with our friends, how our children play with other children is going to look different. And if we're talking about racism, the other pandemic, we're fighting that right now. We're in the heat of it. We're in the thick of it. Where we're going to end up, I hope it's something better than where we currently are. I hope to answer some of your questions, but I don't know what the future holds, but I hope it's something great. And the first step is we got to get that occupant of 40 of them in Washington out of office. We got to get 45 out. For me, that's where it begins.
There's also questions from Robert Perkins and Michael Stein.
My question was answered about the Health Care Act. Thank you.
That's Michael Stein. David, you're muted.
I'm looking for Robert Perkins. Is he?
It was for Selina. If
Oh, there.
I
Okay.
have a question. I just made a statement.
Okay.
Okay. Would you like to make the statement aloud, or?
I was in the heat of the moment. For some reason, my chat is disabled, so I can't even go back and see what it says.
Oh, okay.
It shouldn't be, but we have it here, Robert.
Okay.
You
can read it because I can't see it.
If you scroll up, can you see it?
I'm an old guy. I'm not used to these.
I know, it's hard.
Okay, but if you receive monies from the PBA, what are the odds of you pushing back? That was for Selina.
Right. That was in respect to, I think somebody was saying something about was Diane Savino on board as far as there was something happened with the police and they want to know if she was part of signing on or whatever. And I said, if you receiving money from them, what's the odds of you pushing back?
I want to say something.
Debbie wanted to say something. She didn't
To
chat it because
Selena.
she was sitting next to me.
To Selena.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay. I just wanted to say that the irony of all ironies is that the week before COVID happened, March 10th, I am also a retired UFT teacher, and we had a retired teachers meeting. And at that time, the head of the retired teachers committee gave, a speech to the members. And one of the things that he bragged about was that the UFT had been instrumental in defeating that bill for single payer. And I want you to ask, and I confronted him afterwards and I said, COVID-19 is coming. How could you do that to your members? Your members are not safe. If some people have health care and other people do not have health care, we all live in the same world where our health is all affected. And he said, oh, why are you getting so angry? And I think the thing is that a lot of these people, why that bill was stalled was because a lot of union leadership did not support the bill. They felt that their members, their role was to protect their members' so-called better health care rather than fight for everyone's health care. And I think that that's part of anyone who is a member of a union needs to take responsibility and step up and say, no, we're all in the same boat. And we all have to fight for single payer health care. So I wanted you to respond to that because I think that some of the union leadership in New York State played a very, very negative role in shelving that bill or defeating that bill, whatever happened.
And I can tell you that there were a couple of unions that gave a lot of pushback. DC 37 and UFT and probably others gave us some pushback on that bill because the rhetoric was that it would be paid on the backs of their members who are Black and brown and lower income. UFT does organize a small sector of healthcare professionals, and that is the fear that they're putting out there, that it would be, that it wouldn't be helpful to them, and it'll be more expensive for their members. I can't speak to their real reason. All I can tell you is what I heard, and speculation.
Hasn't acted in a proactive way because she's beholden to those, or works with in conjunction with those.
Yes. So we have not, and a lot of the electeds, I think the reason co-sponsoring a bill is a safe way for them to say, I support it. It's not enough. You have to champion the legislation. You have to get your members. You have to walk around. You have to build coalitions. It is not okay to just vote on a bill and then not support it. It is not okay to just co-sponsor a bill and then say, oh yeah, I co-sponsored that bill, and then you go in front of the unions and then you have to ask for support or money. They use that co-sponsorship as, yeah, I supported that bill, and then we give them money, and then we go out there and fight for them and say they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. In actuality, we are looking, Naisna, we have a new political director, and we are looking for champions now. We are no longer accepting the status quo of you co-sponsoring. If you're not walking around pushing your colleagues to do the same thing and to whip those votes for our legislation, I really feel that our membership is going to push back in supporting those electeds going forward.
Excuse me. I was wondering if anybody else on the panel would answer the question that I posed. This is Neil speaking.
What about,
Okay, do you want to?
Question.
Yeah, the question was, the very first question we got, which was, what are your views regarding getting back to normal versus creating something new and different?
Thank you.
Can I answer that? I think that all the COVID situation and, you know, just all of everything that we've seen so far in the last few months shows us that we can't go back to normal, shows us that normal doesn't work. And I think that a lot of people were exposed because of the crisis of how close to zero most people are living. You know, I have a lot of my family, you know, relying on the unemployment checks right now, and trying to just make by, you know, and I think that it's just really important to rethink what we value in the society. And I think there really truly has to be a culture shift. And I think that this pandemic will lead to one, and should lead to one, if we continue to apply pressure, because we're talking about not only those who were staying home, you're also talking about just how COVID disproportionately impacted racial and ethnic minorities. You know, most racial and ethnic minorities didn't have the luxury of one, staying home, two, you know, are more likely to live in densely populated areas, or living in neighborhoods where groceries and medical facilities are not in their backyard, are living, you know, so, and are more likely to not have medical insurance, you know, not have the supplies that were needed to live in multi-generational households. And, you know, you can even talk about the prison industrial complex, you know, or most likely to be in jails or detention centers where COVID was going rampant. And so when we look about how to really go forward and what the new normal should look like, we should look at these last 3 months and really notice who we were calling essential, you know, who we were saying that they needed to work and that they needed to do their job for our society to function, and think about how what we're going to do is more than just mouth service, is more than just a hand clap or whatever. It's going to be, you know, the necessity of paying these workers an actual living wage, not a poverty wage, a living wage where they can actually, you know, work, whether that's hazard pay or a living wage going forward. Quite frankly, I think both. But, you know, you're talking about essential work. That's what this whole panel was about, you know, about people who have been giving their all for the last few months and even before the last few months, but more so in the last few months, right? And people who essentially were really out there, those are many African American, Hispanic, you know, other minority populations that were showing up every day. So we need to show up. We need to make sure that we are continuing to invest in our communities. We need to address the lack of testing that's being done. We need to address the basic health and safety for our workers as we start reopening other businesses. We need to talk about just the structure of work, which I think, you know, was mentioned today, about how people, you know, how big organizations get to skirt through the line of what an employee is and how they are going to get compensated by how they classify them, you know, and we really need to address and assign the real value of work in our societies. Stop it with the poverty wages. Stop it with the absence of health care. You know, stop it with the lack of access to quality education. So what our future looks like, it's not normal, because people are sick and fed up of having to make ends with the bare minimum. That's not acceptable. So the new normal needs to address the systemic issues and also address the issues in this culture and how we assign value to each and every one of us.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. That was very, very good. If we could unmute everybody, you'd probably be getting a big hand. Thank you. John, you had a question?
Make sure you're unmuted, John.
Oh, I think he was just raising a hand to approve.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, now you're unmuted.
Okay. I wanted to ask, are any of the unions advocating for comprehensive change in the economy at the federal level? I've read several articles saying that in order to pull out of this depression, we're going to need like World War II levels of spending by the federal government, a massive investment program. Right now, the federal government spends about 20% of GNP and needs to go up to 40 or 50 to pull ourselves out of this depression. And so we basically need a Green New Deal. And for example, we also need a new model for doing news in the United States. The old model of supporting it through advertisements not working. Are any of our unions advocating for a comprehensive new investment which decommodifies, many of our most important goods, such as the news and health and environmental policy?
Just on the news, yes. We're involved in two campaigns, one with the News Guild, the other with the International Federation of Journalists. Like you said, the model of news being based on selling ads is broken. It's been broken. It doesn't work. And, we think it has to be viewed as a public good. And on the one hand, we're fighting for a stimulus package from the government to support journalism. And on the other hand, we're fighting part of an international campaign to tax big tech that makes billions off of news that they don't produce, especially Facebook and Google and the rest of them, and to have them taxed and have that tax money put back into sustaining journalism. But I think the bigger question really is how much can things change with the same group in power? And that, to me, that's really where this is all headed. Who has power and who doesn't, and how do we go about getting power. And, you know, I've been around long enough to see demands for the police to first integrate when they were all white, and then have community control, and then have a civilian review board, and then have body cams, and then have something else. I was reading something today where somebody was saying that the people should wear body cams, not the police. But all of these reforms have led nowhere. And things in the level of racist terror carried out by the police right now is unequaled in my lifetime, and is on a par with anything I think that we saw the police carry out in Birmingham, Alabama, or other places. And the question is, who has power? And until the masses of the people have power, you know, basically things are going to be more the same than different, because there's a vested interest in keeping things the way they are. There's, you know, we put out a statement about the rebellion that kind of spoke to both the racist terror and the attacks on journalism. Well, the racist terror by the police, in our opinion, is to enforce inequality. That's what it's there for. All of the things that Tatiana just mentioned, you know, you have to force people into accepting that. You have to terrorize people into accepting that. You have to lock up a whole generation to get people to accept that. So on the one hand, the terror is there to enforce these conditions, and the attacks on the media are kind of like the canary in the cage of a so-called democratic society slipping away, and maybe more than slipping, on the road to fascism. So these are the huge questions that we're facing. And, you know, like somebody spray painted on a subway station in Hong Kong, there's no going back to normal because normal is what was no good in the first place. And I think that's where we are right now.
I'd like to ask a question if I could. I mean, there are many police unions, but there are also other unions that work closely with them, like the correction officers unions, and there's a union for prosecutors, for DAs, I believe. How much do other unions react to this? I mean, are they going to do anything about standing out against the rampant injustice across the justice system?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, because I spoke a lot. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I wanted to say that, I mean, with my union, they are not, they're not in the practice of breaking ties with the New York City Police Department. They're not in practice of doing that. They're not in practice of really coming to the defense.
Thank you.
To the defense of you know, poor working class people, you know, and I think that and the other question that was talked about was environmental. The other thing, the reason why we have such a huge problem with pollution is because of it really comes from cars and burning gases, right? So one of the major things that's happening in this country has been really just the mass production of cars. And I mean, and a lot of that has to do with you know, these big industries, Honda, Toyota, and etc., who are putting money to pay for these politicians and buying them to defund transit. And when they defund transit, that limits how much the trains can expand. And if trains can be used on a wide range, I mean, you wouldn't need cars so much. You wouldn't even need you wouldn't need cars. You wouldn't need a lot of these other transportation. You can just use you know, trains and buses to get people where they needed to go. But because cars are the main way that a lot of these big industries make money and profit, what drives the killing and the defunding of trains. And I mean, that's another way. I mean, I think that when we're talking about the new norm and what has been consistently living in this country, in this system, we are constantly, I think we're constantly talking about the same thing. We're constantly talking about how these our companies, our bosses, our programs are being cut because of the need for more profit, right? Or choosing what's essential and who isn't. And they're constantly putting people who lives are either poor people, Black and Latinos at the very bottom are the most exposable. And I think this is something that we're going to constantly. This is going to be the continued norm. And I think that even with these protests, and I think this is a very good thing. I think it's like one. I don't know who said it, but it is essential, and I think it's a part of this system that needs racism. And I think that I think that we need to get in the streets. We need to push our unions, but Black and Latinos are going to continue to get hit hard with the coronavirus. Transit can dish out all the hand sanitizers they want, and masks, and tell people to stand 6 feet apart. But now that this economy is opening up, we're going to get a much higher increase of COVID-19, and they are going to be putting more people at risk to die. We're going to reach the 200,000 mark, and by September, and we're going to get hit with the second wave combined with the flu season, and it's going to be a serious problem. But I think that I have confidence in people who want to get involved and people who are in protest. We have to really fight against what has been the essence of our oppression in the system, and that's affecting everyone here. And our pain and our suffering is intertwined with each other, and this is all because of what is being the main driving factor of all these things: mass incarceration, education, youth programs, jobs. I think all these things are intertwined. Our lives are going to be in jeopardy regardless. Coming up with the vaccine at the end of this year, I mean, even next year, a lot of people are not going to be able to get it. It's going to be limited, and and a lot of people are not going to get it for a long time. We're going to be in this COVID program coping for a long time. Maybe within the next 2 years, but I said too much.
No, you did great.
You did great, Sneferu. Thank you. Steve wanted to talk. Steve, did I unmute you?
Yep, I got it. So thank you very much. Thank you again for having me today. But I just wanted to kind of leave off with this statement, and kind of captures all the questions that were asked. Look, the crisis, the dual crisis, has opportunities in them as well. So when we talk about reopening, we talk about all the different policies and things that are going to come from it. The one opportunity, the opportunities that I see most coming out of this, where we could change a lot of the future, is the way that we're organizing. I believe this is a stepping stone for the new labor movement of the 21st century. I think workers that went through the traumatic experience, essential workers who went through the traumatic experience of the COVID pandemic, and then followed up with the mass protests, have come to a point where they're fed up. They realize that their employers did not care about them when things got bad. They realize that the credibility of the employers are severely questioned right now, and that's an opportunity for ground up organizing Secondly, I think also the conversations around race and inequality actually leads all back to like, wait a minute here. Not only did my employer run when everything went bad, but they were holding me down the whole time because I didn't have the PPE or the benefits or the wages that I needed. And it put me in a position to be weak and nobody cared at this time. So this is about worker empowerment at this moment. And I think that if the protests have taught us anything, it's like 3 weeks of protesting has accomplished more than any voting has done. So I think we need to bring it to the streets. I think we need to organize in greater numbers and better than we have in the past. I think unions need to support. They need to support things that the community needs more now than ever. I'm a big fan of this theory of collective bargaining for the common good, where we start to take the common good and we put that into our demands on the employers as well. So I'm hopeful that we see a lot more of that happening. I'm hopeful that I know that my union, the CWA, nationally is supporting both the Green New Deal and the defunding of the police department and the moving of resources to places that are in need. So I'm happy to be in part of an organization, a labor union that has that sort of view for the future. So hopefully we accomplish those goals. I've seen that we have in my small little world, but I hope it's expanding beyond that. So with that, I do have to drop off, and I just want to say thank you so much again for having me today, and peace and love for everyone. I'll talk to everyone soon. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much, Steve, and all the panelists.
Thank you.
Feel very proud of Peace Action to having had this forum and the people who spoke.
And don't mourn, organize.
Thank you, Dave, for great moderating and all the panelists.
Is there anybody else who?
Just want to say this has been great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, it has been great. Thank you, David and Debbie, for being the chief organizers. Good job.
Everyone was great.
Yeah, it was really
Kathy,
amazing.
did you want to talk?
I just wanted to say, in response to the question that I asked the panelists, you're speaking, a system that doesn't create the conditions of a healthy life for all of us and causes and creates a situation of horrible racism doesn't deserve to exist. We ought to think about creating a different society where those conditions would not exist. And people ought to be thinking about that. Thank you.
Kathy, did you want to?
I think that's a good note to end on.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Good job.
Bye, Ibrahim. It was great meeting you.
Me too.
Great meeting you, Sneferu.
Nice meeting y'all.
Take care.
Bye, Joel.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Louise. Tatiana, you were amazing. Bye, Joanna. Bye,
Take care.
Vanessa. Bye, Clara.
Tatiana.
Thank you, Janice.
Tatiana.
People on the phone.
Sal, call me. There's the call is for you.
Okay, I'm not answering it.
Okay, Sally, I heard you. Thank you. It was a wonderful meeting. I'm getting ready to go on one now for the caravan. This is Clara.
Okay, June 28th, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
and the
you're
one
gonna
you
tell
had,
us.
yes, I will. But the one you had was fabulous. I'm glad I got in on that. Okay, then, so let me leave because I have to get on that one.
Okay.
Bye-bye,
everyone.
Bye, Jazzy.
You did a great job, Sally. I got to come around the corner so you can train me and all the chutzpah, you and David, on this technical
Tech
stuff.
support. Tech support.
Okay. Bye-bye now. I see you. You can't see me.
Bye, Jean. I'm glad you joined.
Oh, I don't see that.
Bye, Jazzy. Bye, Joel. Good job, Dave. Good job, Debbie.
Thank
We
you.
really got it together.
We got a
really
great panel
surprised.
together. Really great.
Yeah,
panel.
it was really very good.
It was very exciting.
Too bad it couldn't be in person.
It's been recorded.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I'm ending.
Nice seeing you, Dave. How are you?
I'm good.
That's good.
Okay, here it goes. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.